The HVAC field is starving for young, eager techs. This is the most exciting and challenging field to be in. Come on a journey to find out what you really need to get started from a veteran and company owner who has trained many successful techs. Welcome to Abilityman's HVAC Toolbelt. HVAC Toolbelt. Today, I wanted to get into a subject about school. Do you have to go to school to be an HVAC technician or installer? This subject may be controversial. I understand there's going to be a lot of opinions here. Depending on the size of my audience, I'm probably going to get some hate directed in my direction, but here it is. I can only speak from my experience and what I've seen. HVAC schools I've hired out of, local, regional, or big schools, I've seen them all. I've hired a bunch of guys. Most guys that I hire out of the local trade schools, the ones that are just based around your area, when I get these guys, they know nothing. I mean, rarely can they change out a motor. If they can braze, it's very limited. I have to generally retrain, and I feel like they are, for the most part, wasting their money. It's unfortunate because my information, my podcast, my YouTube is geared towards educating people, and it would be a great outlet for me to market to these companies. But that's what they are. They're companies, and they're turning out products that are, the people, the techs, they're not viable. What you really need to learn is on the job. That is the reason for certifications like NATE in the HVAC. That is the same for ASC, for auto mechanics. It is on-the-job training that's really going to solidify your education. You need to have a good balance between the books education and the hands-on education. And I don't know exactly what they're doing in these schools, but they're just not giving these guys enough hands-on education as to how an air conditioner works. I've seen guys wire disconnect boxes. Now, a disconnect box is just about the most basic thing you could do in electricity, other than a 115 volt switch to turn a light on and off. A disconnect box is the most basic thing you could do. You have two power wires coming in and a ground, and you have two power wires going out and a ground. This is very simple. I have seen guys mess this up. I have seen guys go through the school, come out, and put a drain switch for the pan on the outside of the pan. Why on earth would somebody turn out a technician who can't even put in a drain switch on a pan or a pan switch? It's beyond me. To me, that demonstrates that they're only after the money, not necessarily giving this tech or this future tech the tools that he needs to get along in the HVAC field. And that is my entire reason for this podcast. I want to prepare people. I want people to be successful in this field. We are going to be in a sorry state in the United States and around the world if we cannot get people who can work on the stuff that's being produced. That is one thing to have a piece of equipment that's made in a factory. You can give a guy a job to braze fittings day in and day out, do the same braze over and over and over again. That is not a challenge. The challenge is putting people in place who can get on a job, who can look at a piece of equipment, evaluate it, and fix it, because not every situation is the same. Not every install is the same. Not every repair is the same. Maybe it gets a little bit robotic, but every single job is different. Why did the contactor burn out? Is it a high amperage situation for the compressor because the ductwork's undersized? Or why is there a bunch of oil in the copper lines, and that's caused by lack of airflow? Like, There's all these things that go into thinking about a job, and these schools cannot possibly teach in the matter of a few months during the evenings how to work on an air conditioner. So they're just taking guys' money. I know it may be very unpopular, like I said, but this is my opinion on it. I have not hired anybody out of these local schools that was worth anything. The best way to go is an apprenticeship. These are not easy to come by. There are many different companies, but most companies do not want to, hire you for like 2 days a week, or for the mornings only, and then you can go to school. Like, that's just not a reality. This does not happen very often. So it's upon you. If you really want to get into this field, which I highly recommend it, you need to try and get creative about an apprenticeship program. Unless you can find an apprenticeship program, there are unions out there. I am not in a heavily union area. They are not, and also unions are mainly for commercial. There's very few unions in places that I've lived that center around residential HVAC. So finding an apprenticeship program can be a little bit tough. I have seen guys who already worked for an HVAC company. They were, say, a delivery driver, and they came to their manager and said, "Hey, I want to be an HVAC tech." The manager liked the guy, said he has a good work ethic, and we will help you get your education, or we'll save your spot while you go to school, or whatever. You're in the door already. You've shown the guy that you're worth their time and possibly their money, depending on if they want to help pay for that or not. But that is one way to go about it. You say, "Hey, I want to do this." Go get a job in an HVAC company doing something else. Show them your work ethic and that you're worth their time and their money. The other way to do it is to maybe go to one of these local schools. I'm not saying that they're completely devoid of information. They have valuable information that they can teach you, but you have to be working in the field in conjunction with that. That way you're following behind a guy, or maybe the guy's generous enough to allow you to do minor repairs. Then you go to your school and you can ask the questions. That would actually help out the entire class. Like, "Hey, I was on the job, I ran into this thing. Can you explain to me why this is doing what it's doing?" That is valuable data. This is one way to go about it. I totally advocate this. The other thing to do, again, I'm not really advocating going to one of these schools, but go to the school, get your education. Now you need to get your foot in the door. I'm gonna do a whole podcast on like how to get your foot on the door, because I feel like this is very valuable information. Not a lot of guys know how to actually go about getting a job, so I'm gonna do a whole podcast on that. But for right now, we're going to concentrate on school. So if you can get your foot on the door, you can like maybe negotiate lower pay, anything to get the on-the-job experience. That way you know what questions to ask. If you're just sitting in class, like you don't know how this applies. Okay, great, you have a motor. Okay, so you can ohm out the motor and find out common to start plus common to run equals start to run. Why would you need to know that? Okay, you know how to do it, but if you don't know why you need to do that, then what's the point? I mean, okay, for an example, I had this calculation. I've known it for years. I know that you can diagnose a bad motor with it, but what if your labels completely burn off and you unwired it and you're like, "Oh, how do I put these wires back on?" Well, you can use that calculation in order to figure out, oh, which one's common, which one's start, which one's run. So you can use that to wire a motor back that the labels are gone. But how would you know that unless you've actually worked on the job? If you're going to do this and you're going to work at a place and go to school, make sure that your schedules match up. This is not going to work if you're going to school 8 to 12 and you want to show up at 1 o'clock to go work at a job. Nobody's going to hire you. I'm sorry. That's just as a company owner, that just does not work for me. I am going out of my way to help you out, and you may or may not even be worth it. You may or may not even stick with me. It's just not a good business decision. So, if you're going to go to one of these schools, make sure that they have a schedule that is conducive to you actually working in another company. Residential companies usually fall into two categories. I'm talking about residential, okay? I am in a metropolitan area, but I'm kind of in the suburbs. So I'm not in the middle of a big city, okay? So this applies to my experiences based on where I live and where I've been a contractor. So the two companies that I have experience with are the companies that are so small they don't have time for you to learn. Time is their most valuable asset. If one guy goes out sick for a day, that messes up the whole entire schedule. You don't have, 30 guys who can absorb, one or two guys missing for a day. Then you have the company that is so big, they really don't care to pay to have you learn on the job. They just want experience. It is on you to make sure that you are educated off their time, and they don't really care whether you get educated or not. They just need bodies out there going to jobs and just diagnosing quickly so they can pass the call up the line to either a more senior tech or a salesman or whatever it is. But these companies don't generally even care whether you get trained or not. For you to say, hey, I want to go to this training class, it's from 12 to 2 on a Thursday, they say, oh, okay, no problem. But then when 12 to 2 comes along, they say, well, we have this call, so you can't go on that. Because money in their pocket is more valuable than you going out and getting an education. So that leads to my one of my other points is too many residential companies I know really don't invest enough resources into training you. It is ultimately your responsibility to get the training. This training is vital, however. I'm not saying go to the local schools. What I'm saying is if you go to the supply house and you see an advertisement for a class, you should take that class, especially classes on things like airflow, refrigerant, and heat pumps. These are very valuable. You may think, oh, well, I know about that. That's not a big deal. You will always pick up information in these classes that's, you're like, oh, whoa, that totally explains that phenomenon. Like, I had no idea that was even a question. And then all of a sudden, it opens your mind to a whole nother way of doing things. These classes are very valuable. Even if you get a class like on a vacuum pump or how to pull appropriate vacuum. Okay, that's amazing. Like, I didn't know that this is actually how you pulled a proper vacuum. Like, too many guys give up on pulling vacuums because they just weren't pulling them right to begin with. I fell into that category. I tried to pull a vacuum. I bought the meter. I did the whole thing. And I just couldn't make it work. So I gave up on it for literally for years until an associate I had, a guy who used to actually work for me, started his own company, and he was going through it with me. And I was blown away. I was like, whoa, I was doing that completely wrong. So that's my point is you really need to get this training. Even if you think you know what you're doing, get the training, go to the classes. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got to where I am right now. Just because it shows an example of not the standard method people would think somebody could get to my position. I started work at it was a contractor who worked strictly on swamp coolers. So at the time, he had a swamp cooler contractor's license, which it wasn't called that, but basically he could work on ventilation, and it was kind of like a weird category. So we started into air conditioning, and we said, okay, great. Well, we need our EPA cards. So there's three of us, and we got the book, all three of us, and we went through the book and we just studied it and we drilled each other on the answers because on especially the ESCO exam, there is an answer to every single there's a question there's an answer to a question every single paragraph. They tell you that in the beginning of the book. So if you just understand every single paragraph, forget about understanding the full concept. If you just take each paragraph and basically know what each paragraph says, then boom, you pass the test. It's 100 questions. It's 25 questions per category. There's the core in 3 categories. Not a big deal. So we did this. We just drilled each other for about a week. And we passed our ESCO exam. I think we got like 90, we ranged from 90 to 97% on the test. Bam. We can buy refrigerant. We have a contractor's license. We're up and going. That applies to a technician. If you have your EPA card, that is the only thing that's required in my current area. Some other areas you are required to get a separate license as a technician. I'm not sure exactly about those or how prevalent that is, but in my 2 areas that I've lived, the only thing that's required for you to be a technician is an EPA card. That is like $100 investment. It's like less than $100, and you can be a technician minus the tools. So that's what I did. I got my EPA card. Then I started managing that air conditioning side of the company. And I started hiring guys. I bought some vans. And we just started working on air conditioning. And we did pretty good with it, actually. So I continued my education, though. I was reading books. I bought the refrigeration book, like the modern refrigeration. Where is I even have it here somewhere? And I just started going through this thing and reading chapter by chapter and educating myself. Now, I was an auto mechanic, so I was used to reading textbooks on auto mechanics, and I had been to some training classes and stuff like that. But I educated myself. I was like, oh, this is a problem. Okay, what's causing that? How do I fix it? And I would just go and I would research it and I would figure it out and I would fix it. I had many a package unit apart, completely dismantled, tracing down wiring, saying, oh, well, I see in the diagram there's a switch there, and where's the switch, and what does it look like? And I mean, I really was fortunate in that nobody in my company actually knew what they were doing. So when I completely dismantled the unit, they were like, yeah, keep on going. Let's figure this out. That's how I learned air conditioning. I did not go to school for this. I did take classes, though, whenever I had a chance, whenever I had some time, which I didn't have a lot of time. We were really, really busy. I would go to the classes. I went to like a Train airflow class. I went to furnace heat exchanger class. I went to classes on TXVs, heat pumps. I got my innate certification when I was in the field for 2 years. My boss said, hey, who wants the innate exam? I jumped at the chance. It was not exactly close to my house. It was after hours. I had a family with 4 kids. My wife wanted me home. I said, no, I got to do this. I went and I passed my NATE exam, had that card. Then, well, at that time I was working for a medium-sized company. So I quit working where I was basically a manager, hiring guys. I wanted a more professional atmosphere, so I went to work for what I would consider a medium-sized company. They had air conditioning and plumbing, so we had probably 20 to 30 employees at that company, and probably like 12 techs, some installers, and then they had a sheet metal company. So, I mean, they had, I'm going to say, under 100 employees total amongst the different divisions or companies. So from there, I really pushed myself. I went to more classes. I wanted to be a manager at that company. So I went to my boss. I said, hey, what can I do? So I was in communication with my boss on what they needed and wanted from me as a technician. How could I move up into a management position? I was very involved that way. I also would give seminars in the morning meetings sometimes. Not very many, but some. But I was like I said, very involved. I pushed myself. I read books. I read more books. Well, and for variety, I read more books. This is very important to continually educate yourself in this field, whether it's as a technician, whether it's as an installer. Installers can get NATE certifications as well. Whether it's management, you should always be educating yourself in this field, or personally, financially, all aspects of your life, you should be educating yourself. However, in this field, there is no shortage of information. I guarantee you will not hit the end of it if you continue to reach for the information in this field. In conclusion, do you need formal education? No, you do not need a formal education in this field. Do you need training? Absolutely. You are going to find the training from the people who work for the different products, for the different brands, for the parts house technical support guys. These are the guys who know what they're talking about. I highly recommend not wasting your money on a local trades program. These guys, I've seen the teachers, they are not very good. I'm sorry. They are, in general, not very good. I have not seen very many techs come out of these schools with any truly useful education. These guys, I have not had one of these guys actually continue on that I personally have hired go on and continue in this field. I have hired guys who knew absolutely nothing, trained them up, and they have continued to work in the field and even open up their own companies. I have seen that many times. They are contractors today. They continued to educate themselves. They are passionate about what they do. On two of these guys, they didn't even want to get into air conditioning. I recruited them. I saw them. I saw their work ethic. I said, hey, I want you to come to work for me. And they love it. They love the air conditioning field, and they are thankful today. They still call me with problems. They call me with successes. They say, hey, John, you got to check this thing out. We're in great communication. And I have guys who I've hired who went to the trade schools and expected to make great money right off the bat. They invested all this money, this time, and found that they weren't really worth very much. And they're not interested in the field, though. They don't continue to educate themselves. They do not look happy. I am not in communication with these guys. Usually ended up in a very bad relationship because they had no idea what they were doing, and they thought that they were so much more valuable than they really were. I know I'm getting a little bit off a tangent here, and I'm kind of complaining about things. I don't like to complain about things, but I am actually very passionate about the fact that I feel like most of these schools are just taking people's money, and I think that it's wrong. No, you do not need to go to one of these trade schools. Yes, you need training. Go get the training. Stay off the local trade schools. I'm not talking about like the proper colleges, the really extensive training programs. Those guys, I've seen guys who are still in the field who like air conditioning, who have gone to those, they're more college-based, and their extensive programs. Those are fine. Those are good. By all means, do that. You could go work for a big corporation. You could be an engineer. I mean, you could do all kinds of things with that. But these local trade schools are, in my opinion, just garbage. Anyway, that's it. I've said my piece. You guys have a great week out there. Go get some training. Take the next training course you see. No matter if you think you know it all or not, just go ahead and take it. See what happens. Have a good one.